And I think, if you look at your business today and your managers can't spend time properly with your people, and they're too busy producing reports that people don't read properly and all this type of stuff, it's something you need to change. And I speak from experience, because I was in operations where I was bogged down. I was in operations where I bogged my teams down. And, one of the biggest things that changed one of my operations that I was managing pre-COVID was when we brought Tenzo into the business, consolidated data, consolidated workload, and we allowed people to go back to what they did best, which was looking after guests and looking after people.
Hello and welcome to the Hospitality Leadership Podcast and to this episode with Scot Turner. Now, Scot has been on the podcast before. He's a past guest back in the days of the Cafe Hustle podcast, where we were more focused around cafes. In fact, it was probably the time around where we were just transitioning into starting to talk a bit more about leadership and the impact that has in hospitality. But this time around, our conversation really has turned to leadership and how we, as leaders in the industry, as owners, as CEOs, as leadership teams, we need to inspire people. We need to inspire people in the right way to get the most out of them and to make the best experience for them in hospitality. So we're going to waste no time. We're going to get into this episode with Scot Turner of Auden Hospitality. So, Scot, thank you so much for joining me again on the Hospitality Leadership Podcast. I think actually last time you were on, we were still the Cafe Hustle podcast. So, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Really excited to be on now. We're talking about leadership as well. So, yeah, excited. And I always listen to the show every week as well. So, you've had some great people on. So, not much to live up to.
And well, we're adding another one with this episode. And as we've just been talking before, and it's about right now trying to dig into more of a flowing conversation, trying to get into the nitty gritty of what makes people tick and how that translates into performance in the hospitality industry. But first and foremost, I want to start with, let's talk about the industry itself and specifically about what's changed, certainly since pandemic. And I know there's countless episodes of podcasts out there where we talk about what has changed, but what is hospitality different now than it was before the pandemic?
It's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because fundamentally it isn't, is it? We still welcome people into our businesses. We still try and deliver them memorable experiences and then say goodbye to them and hope they come back into our restaurant, cafe, bar, whatever that might be. So in essence, has hospitality changed? I don't think it has. I think behaviours have definitely changed that sits within hospitality. And I think it's those elements that operators, people like us, have to understand what's happening. And I think if we take it from a guest perspective, certainly what I'm seeing in the market at the minute across different countries, different operations, is one kind of common denominator coming through. And I think people are looking for more experience, a more experiential visit now than they ever did before. I think previously you could go into a venue, you could have great food, and people would go away and be happy. Now I think people are looking for a little bit more. They want to know the design works. They want to have the great food that they've always had. They want a great drinks program that goes with it, and more importantly, they want great service and they want to go out and spend. We all know what's happening with the cost of living. We all know disposable income's becoming tighter. So it's our obligation now as operators to make sure that we're delivering every ounce of value to those people. So I think that's probably from a guest perspective now. Not that people weren't looking for experiences before, but I don't think it was reliant on that. I think it is now. From a team perspective, and I know we're going to talk about this more today, but from a team perspective, that's probably where the biggest changes come. And I think the teams and the people now who work in our operations are asking for very different things than what probably we did when we grew up in the industry. And, I don't think that's wrong. I think it's probably been needed. And I think it's exciting at the same time as well. And I think, this is where now business and leaders, operators have got to start looking at their operations, got to start looking at their businesses and looking at what they can do differently to keep those people engaged. So I think it's, yeah, has hospitality changed? No. Has behavior changed? Yes. Those who start embracing that are going to be the ones who come out as the brands of tomorrow. And the ones who don't are probably not going to be here to experience what potentially could be quite exciting moving forwards as well.
Yeah, I think, and we talk about really, you touched on there, what is expected from people, or what employees now expect from an employer. And, we are competing against all the other industries. The amount of people that come straight out of school and go into a call center with a bank, is that as exciting or as inspiring as working in the hospitality industry? Absolutely not. You can't change or influence someone else's life like we can in hospitality from sat in a call center. But we've got to look at what is it that's pulling people to that work over hospitality. Perhaps it's the hard work, because hospitality is, we can't get away from that, can we? But is it the benefits package that comes along with the job? Is that what's attracting them elsewhere? We have to compete with that now. But I think, as you said, this isn't something that's new. This is what people have always wanted, but never thought that they could get. But since the pandemic, it has changed, hasn't it? We're now in a position where we are having to deliver something that we haven't, as an industry, needed to deliver before.
Yeah, and I think you do you know what, you hit the nail on the head right at the end there. Is we've never had to think about this before as an industry because it's never been a problem. So the abundance of talent on the market, whether that was new coming into the industry or people who'd been in the industry, was in its abundance. So it papered over cracks. And now what I think is happening is, because we don't have that talent, we don't have that skill in the industry, it's starting to show the people who truly care about the people and the people who have always just used the abundance to get them out of jail for free. And, I did a post the other day about retention, and I was sitting there thinking, do you know, actually, I'm not sure as an industry we have a retention problem. And you might think I'm crazy for saying that, but when people come into the industry, a lot of the time they never sat with the careers coach and said, I want to be a restaurant manager, right? They come into the industry, they love it, they hang around, and then that becomes a career that they love. That was what happened to me, and probably countless other people listening to this. I think as an industry, when it comes to people and people who work in the industry, I think we have an attraction issue, and I think we have an engagement issue. And I think that then causes the turnover of people. So I think it's about how we can really look at different elements of the business and what we do, and really look at whether the people who are now working in our businesses today are engaged by what we do as an industry. And I talk about everything there, from benefits through to flexibility, through to training. And then when we have them, how do we properly kind of attract them to the business and keep them there and keep them enthused? And I think, when you talk about call centers, and I'll probably break that down, if you look at certain businesses within the industry, fast food restaurants, you look at a Five Guys, for example, or a Shake Shack, McDonald's. Why would someone come to a business that doesn't care about the people, makes things really complicated, doesn't train people properly? I could go on with a list and then wonder why these people want to go to Five Guys or McDonald's, right? And well, why do they? Because it's super easy. Processes are simple. Training is there in abundance, and it's cool to work at one of those places because of that. So I think, it's we've got to start looking differently. And I had a conversation with a client the other day saying, we now as a generation consume content in short form. We don't consume anything now in long form content. So if you're delivering training on a PowerPoint that the first time you go on the slide it says one of 42 slides, your people are going to switch off. It's like, I do it, you do it probably, and the new generation definitely will. So if you aren't embracing how the new generation thinks, how they learn, how they interact in their daily lives, and start producing training in short form content, you're not going to have engagement like maybe some of the other industries, some of the other businesses are. So I think it's just really looking and starting to analyze every part of your business and going, is what we've always done still relevant to today?
Yeah.
Because we need to start embracing people for the future. And it sounds really big, but when you break it down, it's sitting there in front of you every time you go on TikTok, Instagram, WhatsApp. Like the answers are there. So it's just about how you think differently to kind of evolve what you're doing.
Yeah. But just to go just a step back, and you were talking before about, we are struggling to, the workforce, their expectation has fundamentally changed. How are real businesses, your clients, for example, how are they dealing with that? How are they adapting? What are they doing? Where are they seeing the biggest gains?
I think so the businesses that I see who engage their people the most, and when I speak to other people in the industry, it's the ones who listen to their teams, and it's the ones who pull their teams in to make proper decisions with the senior leaders of the business. They're the ones who are ultimately really successful. And if I want to put, I was talking to Michelle Moreno about a new project that I was pitching for the other day, and she said, if you get this project, you're going to have to hire someone around 20 to 25. I was like, what do you mean I have to hire someone 20 to 25? She went, because the project that you're going to be looking at is aimed at people at 20 to 25, and they think very differently to how we think. So if you don't have that talent and resource on the team, you're not going to be able to deliver everything 120% because you don't think the same. And I think, that was a perfect example that made me stop and think and go, actually, yes, like if senior leaders are kind of in the late 30s, 40s, higher, we need to start bringing people in who are younger in the business, who can have a voice and can talk to people about how they want to be engaged and what they really want from business, and not what we think people want from a business. And I think the brands definitely that are engaging the people do that. I think the other thing for me that's huge from both a guest and a people perspective is how you personalize their experience when they're in the business as well. So we do it for guests. We put a lot of effort in for it for guests, especially in hotels and things like that, how we personalize visits and stays. But we don't necessarily do that for our people. And I think, if we can then start personalizing that. So we have standard training there, but we also have a catalogue of other modules that are other learning experiences that you might be able to allocate to people based on what they want to learn. So I think as an industry, sometimes we get really protective, and when people tell us they want to learn different skills, we get worried about whether they're going to leave, or why do they want to better themselves? They're going to go work for someone else. But actually, when you see the new generation now, they just want to learn skills. Absolutely. So if you can give them those resources, there's loads of different stuff from some of the training platforms offer it, LinkedIn Learning, free resources online, go on YouTube. It's the most free encyclopedia going, isn't it? And you allow them to learn life skills, you allow them to learn other skills. They're more likely to be engaged in what you are as a business because they genuinely know you care. And I think that's what I'm seeing, is that those people who don't just look at it as a one-sided relationship are the ones who fundamentally are being successful in terms of retention and looking after the people.
Yeah, we have to gain that perspective as a leader, whether you are, like you say, mid-30s or older. We don't have that experience and see the world the way the younger people, the workforce that we want to attract, we don't see the world in the same way as they do. And if you can't, and it's certainly as a coach, that's what certainly me being on the younger side anyway, brings a little bit of a benefit to people, is because we're getting the idea of what people are now looking for. But there's nothing better, like you say, than talking to people who are in that age range, who are living through the lens of the people that you're wanting to attract and retain and inspire. And without doing that, without having that self-awareness that we need to reach out and get that information, then we're going to be on the back foot as a leader, but also as an employer when it comes to being one of the more attractive people in the market. Now, you mentioned earlier we haven't got a retention problem. We've got I think you said we've got an inspiration problem. We've got to inspire people. How can we do that, both prospective employees and also the employees that we've got? You mentioned around training and developing them as individuals, but how do we communicate that to people maybe who are potential employers?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as an industry, I think we've always been great at saying how good we are, but I don't think we've ever really told people the skills that you can develop as an individual and as a person. So, we've always had the big benefits in the industry that everyone, you can go to the local bar and because you're industry, you get cheap drinks and things like that. But, if I look at hospitality and what it's taught me over the years, there's so many soft skills. There's so many things about myself that the industry's taught me. And I've developed skills because of what I've faced in the industry as well. And I don't think we do enough about teaching young people that a couple of years in hospitality can give you an amazing platform for the future. And you know what? Then once we attract those people, because we come to hospitality, you're going to learn amazing skills, whether you're a waiter, a senior manager, and what other industry can you do that in? Then it's up to us to keep people there. And that's why I said before, I think we've got an attraction issue because we don't attract people properly. And then when we have them, we have an engagement issue because we don't do enough to keep them, and then we lose them out of the industry. So I think it's really about how we can talk to them about we're quite selfish, and I see it a lot when you talk to people. We're selfish as an industry, that we always think about us, and a lot of the time it's because senior leaders are overwhelmed, the business is busy, we've got turnover of people, and we think about me. But if we actually flip that and start looking at what the benefit is for the individual, actually we're probably going to solve a lot of the issues because it's seen as a two-way partnership. And I think that's, when you read things about the younger generation and when you watch them and you listen to them, you see that they want more than just, it's more than a job. And that might seem crazy because people say, oh, Gen Z, they're so lazy, they don't want to work in hospitality because it's hard and all the rest of it. It's rubbish. I think it's they want to know that they're valued. They want to know that they're going to get something out of it, and they'll go and make you a load of revenue. Mm-hmm. But they want to know that they're going to get something back in return. And if we start talking about soft skills and making them aware of what it teaches and that type of thing, I think we're going to do a lot better job of keeping people around and attracting them in the first place. And I was speaking to Wouter from Hospo Life just recently, and he was saying he speaks to a lot of colleges and schools in Europe. And he had a crazy stat, which I can't remember, but he had a crazy stat in terms of how many people actually go onto a university or college course that's attached to hospitality, and how many of those people come out of it and actually go into the industry. And the stat is pretty scary in terms of there's a higher percentage leave the industry, even though they've studied it, than they do come into the industry. So that really kind of sets the tone of how we need to do better, I think. And there is some people out, Hospitality Rising are doing an amazing job of starting to kind of talk to the TikTok generation and that type of thing. Yeah. And I think more people should look at some of the great work that those guys are doing and replicate and kind of embrace that thinking, because it's working and it's how you should talk to people nowadays as well.
Yeah, the TikTok generation that we throw around and is, like we said earlier, it's all about short form content, and the likes of how we interact with them as potential employees, as customers, has changed, and we have to realize that as an industry, as even at the individual business level, we need to adapt, and we need to adapt quickly, and because the longer we take to build the attraction level back in hospitality, the bigger the hole will be, say in 3-4 years time, where we are struggling to get that skill level back up. And we'll talk to you about skill a little bit later on. But how can we then how can we really invest in these people? How are we, like, what are they looking for? Is it a case of just giving them, the odd course to develop them? Or are they looking for something deeper? What is it that these people want now? What will bring them back to us?
Yeah, I think they want connection. I think they want connection, and that's definitely what I'm seeing. They want managers and leaders to be present, truly present, and that means as senior leaders of a business, we have to look at everything that's stopping managers, general managers, restaurant managers spending time with the team, and we need to give them that time back. And there's ways to do it. There's means to do it, because if all that time that's bogging those managers down on admin or whatever it might be, if they spend that with their team, whether it's a coffee, whether it's one-to-one training, whether it's just talking about how the day is, how the week is, what's going on at home, can I help? That connection, back to that point of showing you care, that connection shows your people you care, and they're more likely to have a relationship with you. That then means they become more engaged in what you want to deliver as a leader. And I think that's where we're suffering a little bit, because too many people are overwhelmed. Too many managers are bogged down in admin. We're not producing information readily for these people, so they're having to try and get the information, and all that time means that they're not spending it with the people. And then when they do, they're either too busy worrying about what's coming through on the latest WhatsApp group, they're too busy worried about kind of have they submitted the report on time, so they're not properly listening and they're not properly connecting. And I think that the new workforce coming through, they see that a lot more than we did. We probably smelt opportunity a bit more. I know I did when I had managers who were overwhelmed, and I could take that workload from them, and I saw opportunity of how I could learn and rise through the ranks. And it was just what happened, so we just got on with it and carried on. The new generation don't. They want connection, they want people to talk to them, they want people to invest in them. And I think if you look at your business today and your managers can't spend time properly with your people, and they're too busy producing reports that people don't read properly, and all this type of stuff, it's something you need to change. And I speak from experience, because I was in operations where I was bogged down. I was in operations where I bogged my teams down. And one of the biggest things that changed one of my operations that I was managing pre-COVID was when we brought Tenzo into the business, consolidated data, consolidated workload, and we allowed people to go back to what they did best, which was looking after guests and looking after people. And we saw huge results in the business because of it. So, if you don't have proper means of reporting, if you don't have inventory systems, if you don't have payroll systems that make these tasks easier, I would encourage anyone to go out today and start looking at what they can do to implement them in the business, because trust me, the investment you'll put into a inventory system that might be £200 a month, that is going to triple, double, 10 times. I can't put a figure on it, but I know it's going to increase on $200 a month in terms of value that brings from a revenue perspective, because your people are engaged in the business. So for me, that connection is key.
Yeah, I think you're talking there about having, buying software and anything that you invest money in to free up time to allow your managers, to allow you to spend more time with your people, is an investment in your people. It's not an investment in that software. That does something that allows you to spend that time with your people. And we need to remember that the people that we employ, the people that interact with our guests, that is the fundamental element of the guest experience. If the people who are working for you aren't happy, they're not going to be in the position to provide an amazing guest experience. And that is where we start to struggle. That's where you start to get negative reviews. Don't get me wrong, if it's amazing food, it makes up for it a little bit. But ultimately, as you said, even the customer, they're after that connection. And if they're if you've got a server who is not happy, who isn't in the right place or frame of mind to give that amazing experience, it's not going to happen. They're not going to be able to develop that connection. It's like I'm working with a client right now where we're developing their vision, building from their values, their mission, and creating a vision and communicating that to their people and working through that. And exactly as you say, one of the fundamental barriers to be able to do that has been the time that they have available to spend with their people. One of the things, and you'll probably have found this as well, as soon as you can communicate that vision for the business to, the most junior members of staff in that organization, the whole culture of the business changes. Everyone knows where they fit into the big machine. Everyone knows how they contribute to delivering this amazing experience for people. And is that something you're seeing as well? Is that, because like I say, I've seen it with 2 or 3 of our clients, but what about you? Are you seeing similar things?
Yeah, definitely. I think a clear vision, and it's back to that communication, isn't it? A clear vision sets the tone for everything that goes in the business. So the other thing I would go on top of there, Andy, as well, is that vision needs to be super, super clear. So when you do it, you need to be able to say your vision eloquently, and you need to be able to be super clear. And when you talk to the most junior member of staff who doesn't have the best English, you need to be able to get it. So it shouldn't be complex. It shouldn't be wordy. It should be really, really obvious to people what it is. And then that should then be a part of everything that you do. And it should link to values, and it should link to, everything else that sits within it. So if you say, we're going to keep things really simple, you can't go building difficult menus that then is going to need crazy amount of people in the kitchen. Everything has to follow through, and you have to use that as the center point to your business to be able to do it. And I think that communication bit is key, isn't it? And how many times do you go into businesses that don't have staff meetings, that don't have management meetings, that don't do pre-shift briefings, and they wonder then why their people don't follow sequence of service or follow process and this type, because you're not giving people the reason to, because you're not communicating effectively. So it's one of the first things that when I go into new businesses and we look at operations, we ask, are you doing management meetings? Do all your managers have roles and responsibilities? Do you do pre-shift briefings? Like, how do you communicate to your people? And that's where we start, because everything else then becomes easier to implement, because there's a culture of talking in the business. And that doesn't include WhatsApp as well.
Yeah,
which is a completely different podcast episode, probably.
Yeah,
but,
I was going to say that is a big discussion point, because, and just on that, is too many people can rely on these tools sometimes to too greater extent, and actually has a negative impact on that connection that we're trying to build with people.
Yeah, I mean, another thing about the new generation is they come to work and they want to excel. Right, so in the right environments that help them thrive, they want to excel. When they go home, they want to go home. So if they're getting WhatsApp messages from the guy who's closing up on a nighttime because he can't reconcile the till and it's waking them up, that has a massive impact on their engagement and how they view the business. So I think there's ways of these communication tools to be effective, but there's got to be a way that people can switch off from them as well, because that does impact the current workforce. And I think, it can help businesses, because if you can't get everyone together for a pre-shift briefing, for the manager to go on a video and say the pre-shift briefing, or tell everyone how the day is, or tell someone who the VIP reservations are for the day, or whatever it might be, we should use technology to aid it, but we shouldn't overstep the boundaries of people's work-life balance and what they value. Some people might want to work and might like to be informed. Other people might want to go and kind of switch off and work. And you kind of jumping on that and kind of not respecting those values is another reason why people don't engage properly. And this is where we were going back to saying, if you have a manager who sits down with someone and talks to them about them, that might come up in a conversation where they go, do you know what, I'm fed up of getting WhatsApp messages. And you can then deal with that. If you're not communicating with those people, you keep doing it and those people leave. And how many times do people leave and not, they tell you it's because they're going for a bigger salary and all the rest of it. And you actually find out it isn't. And that's where this communication comes in and is key. I see it again and again and again that the WhatsApp thing pushes people's buttons from a team level perspective. So I'd encourage it. And there is other platforms out there. We use Slack in our business, and we have a rule that if someone wants to turn their notifications off because they're at home or they're not interested, they can do that. We don't hold it against them, and they don't get notified, and they pick it up the next day. And there's other things, Yapster, and I think Harry's got a tool as well. So there is tools out there that are more effective than kind of WhatsApp as well.
Yeah, and I think the fundamental point here is, again, talk to your people, find out what they need, find out what they want, find out what they don't like, and it's all information for you to do a better job as a leader, and to adjust it. We're not expecting, or you shouldn't expect to have something, a way of communicating, and that's how it stays. You constantly need to be tweaking things, adjusting things to your people, and even over a year, that can change massively. So yeah, always make sure you are talking to your people, as you said before. Now, we spoke a couple of weeks ago, just on a call, and you spoke about the flipped economy now, how things recently, or certainly in the last 12 months, are different than how they may have been, as we've just come out of the pandemic, or even before the pandemic. But first of all, what is the flipped economy?
So the flipped economy is essentially, I now think, so before the pandemic, it was an employer's market. Since the pandemic, Brexit, skill, talent, it's now an employees market. And when we go and look for new people, we have to understand that it's an employees market now. So how we manage recruitment, how we talk to people on adverts, how we communicate with them when they come for an interview has to be done completely different now. Because if we send an advert out on Caterer or whoever it might be, only talk about ourselves and put on there, you get 20 days holiday and we give you a staff meal and bits and pieces, the standard stuff. First of all, you probably will get lots of applicants now, but people will see through that. Then, if you don't communicate with them properly about when the interview is, where it is, how they get there, and all the rest of it, again, make life easy for people. You have a staff shortage, so stop living in the past of going, well, we never used to have to tell people where we were, and people used to go on the website and read, and it doesn't happen. So just stop worrying about staff shortage and start doing what you can to make it happen. And then when they come for the interview, you have to go on the 50-50 rule. You have to go on the 50-50 rule in terms of 50% of the questions are from you and 50% of the questions are from them. And fundamentally, you have to sell the position, the business, you as a leader, to them as much as they have to sell them to you, because now it's a 50-50 contract. And if someone isn't right, then you have to be firm, no matter how much you're in a staff shortage, of going, we're just not the right fit. And that's what I mean about flipped economy now is, it's very much around relationships and whether you both fit each other, instead of you being X brand that has a great reputation and people just want to come and work for you, and it doesn't matter whether their values align or they want to come and work weekends or whatever it might be. If it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And that's why so many people now are leaving within 90 days, because they'll get sold the dream at an interview, they'll turn up, see that dream isn't reality, and people don't put up with it in terms of going, oh, well, I can't have movement on my CV, I need to leave, and people just go. So I think, that flipped economy is very much about going, how do we how do we collaboratively agree that this is the right thing for each other? And I think that's definitely what's changing, and it's not easy. And I'm working in operations now where we're short of staffed, and we need people, and it's really hard when you're in those conversations with people because you see someone who's good, but it's just not the right fit, and it is hard. But long term, it disrupts the team. It's the turnover doesn't help, and if it's just not a good fit, that kind of negativity coming into the operation when you're already stretched doesn't help as well. So I think it's very much about kind of looking at it now and going, okay, how do we work out that we're the right fit for each other, and not necessarily we're recruiting people to work for us. So I think it's just changing that mindset a little bit, and I know it's not easy, but it's definitely something that we need to change.
Yeah, I want to jump on something you've said there. Absolutely, the fundamental rule of hiring is do not just hire anybody. If it doesn't fit, if it isn't right, if you don't feel that this person will fit your culture or the culture you're trying to build, do not make the desperate hire. The amount of times, and you've seen this, the amount of times that's bitten people is probably 90% of the time when they do hire like that. But we're still seeing people doing that. Have you got any ways that people can, resist that temptation to hire just because someone's walked in the door and asked for a job? Or some stories from your clients where it's actually worked, we've hung on and, eventually found something. What are you seeing out there that is working for people?
Yeah, I think it's very much about going in with sort of non-negotiables around who you want to hire and what you need those people to do. And I think it comes down to discipline in the vision, discipline in what you need from the role, and looking at it and kind of being really objective. I don't think there's a secret answer, because I admit we had a conversation yesterday in an operation that I run, and we had a hire who was very good on paper. Was she someone that was going to come in and really grow the business and take it forwards? Possibly not. But was she someone who could come in and run a great operation, keep guests happy and all the rest of it? Yes. And, it's one of those conversations around what's more important. Is it someone who can come in and really grow the business and focus on growing revenues and focusing on quality, or is it someone who can come in and kind of deliver what's being implemented into the business? And we had that conversation there. We've been looking for a long time for this position in this business. We had a conversation with the general manager saying, if you don't need someone now who can grow the business, because you're going to take that responsibility, because this person's here and these are her core skills and this is what she's good at, let's look at whether that now can be a strategy. Because if she comes in and you suddenly expect her to start growing the business, we know she's not going to do that. So we kind of looked at that conversation and said, okay, do we, for the sake of the business, do we need to restructure how that role might look, or do we keep looking and kind of going down there? So I think it's case by case basis of looking at the individual in front of you and going, what skills do they have? Is that a gap in the business that we can utilize? And what other bits might we have to do elsewhere in the business to make that person a success? I think putting them in the hole of going, okay, we're going to recruit that person who we know isn't right, doesn't have the skills, we're still going to ask them to do it. That's the wrong decision. And what you were saying, that's where you're hiring the wrong person. But if there's flexibility to adapt that, and you understand what their potential is, and you understand what they're good at, and you can adapt the role, then that's absolutely the right thing to do. Because we are in a market that's challenging. We are in a market that has a talent shortage, and we have to be agile and we have to be flexible. And fundamentally, if you've got someone sitting there with the right attitude who can bring value and you can adapt elsewhere, then it should be a strategy that's kind of sitting on the table right now. So I don't think there's a secret sauce on this one, but I think it's about adaptability, agility, flexibility, and looking at where you might be able to use other people in the business Is there a superstar sitting there who
Yep.
wants more, that might be able to take some of those duties on, that allows the person you're bringing in to be a success? What's wrong is when you bring them in knowing that they're not good enough for that particular task, and you still ask them to do it, because that's when you have the engagement issue and the retention issue, because they just won't hang around, or you
Yeah.
decide that they shouldn't hang around. So yeah,
I think a lot of people, they look for this perfect match to a role, don't they? You start seeing people who are looking for a particular set of skills and a particular way of working. But actually, the truth is that very rarely do you find someone who will be the absolute perfect person that you are looking for. It's so much better and so much easier for you as a leader is to bring someone in who may not have all the skills but has got the right attitude, the right mindset. And like you say, you either adapt the role to them or you train them up in such a way that they are a better fit for the role as a whole. But if you can start with that fundamental building block of their personality and their mindset and their attitude, you are going to go a long way to creating a team which, I'm not going to say self-managers, but you start to bring the right minds together and it just greases those wheels, doesn't it? You start to just see incrementally that things start to get easier if you hire on that basis, rather than bringing in an extremely well-skilled person who is actually an awful fit from a point of view of your culture, or they bring in toxic tendencies, which can often happen, certainly with higher performing employees. You see it a lot more, that you start getting their egos come into play and they use them to their advantage. But if you can bring in personalities, the right personalities for your business, it's the first step to making your life as a leader, an owner, much easier.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's about giving those people time as well, isn't it? Giving them more time than maybe what was there before in terms of making decisions, because you do need to adapt. And, naturally when you're in a business that's tight and running short, things slip. So you've got to understand it's not easy for people to come into those type of environments, because a lot of the time they're thrown in the deep end. As much as you want to spend time with them, you can't. So you have to allow them more time to settle in and adapt, because the days of going into a business and assigning them a job buddy that they then shadow for 2 weeks, and I haven't seen that for years. And so you've got to allow people time, and you've got to find ways that doesn't rely on you as an individual to deliver that knowledge. I'm not saying skill, I'm saying knowledge. So when someone walks into a new place, find ways, whether it's online training, whatever that might be, of being able to say, this is who the GM is, this is who this is. And so they see faces that they recognize, they know where the staff room is, they know the basics of the business, because there's nothing worse than being on your first day in a job and feeling like you're in the middle of nowhere. A guest asks you where the toilets are, you don't know, and it just, people aren't comfortable with that. So I think it's about ways of kind of accepting that things aren't perfect, and being honest with people that things aren't perfect, and finding ways that you can try and mitigate that slightly in terms of trying to make sure that they're set up for success. Because back to that 50-50 rule, 50% should be you giving them the knowledge, 50% needs to be them who are actively engaged and want to learn and want to be a part of it. And that's where that collaboration piece comes in really tight. Is both sides will make mistakes, and you both have to be able to deal with that and talk about it openly and respectfully, so that you can build a stronger relationship. Because it's like a husband and wife, right? You argue, you bicker, you don't get on, but fundamentally you love each other, and you have a relationship and a partnership. And this should be no different in terms of, there's going to be days where you both get frustrated with each other, but it's that engagement piece and that partnership piece underneath that keeps you both kind of working together as a collaborative approach. And that's how you kind of foster great working culture and great environment. So, yeah, I accept that people will make mistakes and don't look at it as a stick to beat them with. Look at it as a learning experience and a tool to be able to grow together.
And I know we've spoken before as well about, and on that point of collaboration, or at least, meeting people where they are, this concept of de-skilling, or not necessarily de-skilling the workforce, but de-skilling the workplace, and actually looking at things from an operational point of view that are, what can you change that doesn't necessarily need a really high skill level to execute. How are you seeing that panning out with people? Is it something that you are using with clients, is looking at things, how can you make things simpler?
Yeah, I'm doing this with every single client at the minute. And it's something that we're working a lot on. We had this conversation the other week in terms of, what parts of the business do you hold on to the past in terms of doing things in-house because they've always been done in-house, that you can maybe outsource, that you can maybe buy in, because the supply chain element, and I'm going to talk specifically about kitchen because it's probably the easiest way to articulate this. So, people, home is on donkeys, and I'm sure they won't mind me kind of naming them. Amazing restaurant. Food is sensational. Great review from Grace Den in the Guardian. They went from Walthamstow Market, street food, and opened the first venue. We were trying to hire chefs, and we just couldn't find good chefs. We couldn't find people with knife skills, let alone someone who could then make a dish to the right standard. And this is where I started doing a lot of work on de-skilling, and we worked with Smokey, who's one of the co-founders, in terms of what aspects of their kitchen operation could we look to de-skill, and we look to systemize to make it as easy as possible to deliver consistency and quality all the time. So that means if one person phones in sick, you can deliver quality and consistency. If the prep guy has a bad day, you can deliver quality and consistency. And it's really, really important that we start looking at that. And when I say I'm doing it with all my clients at the minute, just for people to kind of put that in perspective, I work with people like the Homies, who are founder-led kind of street food, taking the first brick and mortar to establish restaurant chains to luxury 5-star hotels. And we're doing this in every single business that we're working in. We just did a kitchen and food operation toolkit for a hotel group based out of the Netherlands. And we did exactly the same thing for them across 19 hotels across, I think it's 6 different countries in Europe. So it's not a UK thing. This is a global thing that everyone should be looking at. So a couple of prime examples. Years ago, you would never have bought in prepped veg because there was a stigma around it. We could do it quicker, we could do it cheaper. Buying it in costs a fortune. Look at that today. Right, labor cost has gone up exponentially, so it's a lot more expensive for that one guy to be sat there now chopping onions with a knife. That's a fact. Cost of sales of food has gone up, so again, you've added more cost onto that. So it's another cost factor that's gone on. Then you put into that sickness, retention issues, turnover issues, skill issues in terms of people not being able to use knives properly, and you have a lot of elements in that one job of chopping onions that can go wrong. If you look with a supplier of buying those chopped onions in, no longer is it going to have massive impact on your food cost, and you could probably do it quicker and better yourself. What it's actually going to do is come in probably overall labour and food cheaper, because of and especially in London where you have London living wage. So it's going to come in cheaper, and it goes through a machine that ensures that there's perfect consistency every single time. So if someone doesn't phone in sick, it doesn't make a difference. If the guy's had a bad night out and isn't on it today, it doesn't make a difference. And fundamentally, from a cost perspective, it is equal, if not cheaper than doing it in-house. And that's just a perfect example of how that whole process means you don't need to rely on people necessarily. and you don't need to rely on skill because you have an alternative. Now that doesn't work for everything, and when I look at operations that I work in, we aren't outskilling everything, de-skilling everything, but we're looking at what are the non-emotive bits that we can de-skill. That then means that the kitchen operation can focus on the ones that they do make in-house and can make sure that they're putting 120% effort into it. To give you another example, we work with a hotel group, and they make all their bread in-house, and it's good, right? It's 8 out of 10 probably consistency every single time. And my thing to them is, you have 4 guys who make this bread, and it's 8 out of 10, and it's good, but you know what, if I go out to the market, I can get equally as good bread as what you're producing in-house, and I can buy it in, and I can take all the stress of proving space, quality, consistency, all of this away from you. And I want you to deliver one piece of bread that is wow every single time, 10 out of 10, and is the USP of the restaurant, and all the rest of it can sit and support it, but you have a hero element that you can focus all your attention on. So this isn't necessarily about cutting costs and labor. This is about looking at what you're delivering as a product, focusing on quality, focusing on consistency, because that's what will generate you the revenue, and looking at what non-emotive bits for the customer, the guest, not you, but the guest, because they're two very different things, and look at what is non-emotive to the customer that you can de-skill, or you can look at doing other things with. That means you can focus on delivering really solid bits of quality. And that's what I mean about de-skilling is, we don't have the same level of talent that we used to do. That's a fact. The people who do have that skill are few and far between and cost a fortune. That's a fact. So how do we set people up for success? And that's both from a team perspective by making tasks easier, and how do we set leaders up for success by giving them the tools to make tasks easier that reduces strain on their team and fundamentally means they can deliver the best quality, the best consistency every single day, because that's back to that attraction issue. That's what makes us more attractive as an industry, because we're not having people doing menial tasks that take a load of time, suck energy, suck enjoyment, because we're getting them to focus on being creative, which is what our industry is all about. So yeah, I do a lot of work on de-skilling at the minute, and it's amazing how many chefs are embracing it when you sit down and you have a conversation around it. And as soon as they know I'm not going to try and cut people and cut quality, then they start looking at it and going, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. It's, because it's there's opportunity there for every kitchen to become more efficient and ultimately deliver better quality by doing it as an exercise.
Well, and I can speak to this from personal experience, because in our cafe, this is exactly what we did. In our kitchen, it wasn't about trying to take work away from the people who are there doing the work in the kitchen. Ultimately now, we're talking about knife skills. We're struggling to attract people, as we've discussed throughout this episode. We haven't got the slack in our systems, in our businesses. So if we do have someone who doesn't come in, we haven't necessarily got the numbers there that we can pick up that slack straight away. But by doing this, by finding ways where you can reduce the input that's required, especially when you start looking at the cost of wages versus the additional cost of buying in prepped veg, say, for example, you start to then give yourself more flexibility by doing that, because if you've got people who are trained to a standard, may not work in the kitchen all the time, or maybe it's a KP who can step up to then get involved with preparing the food, it gives you much more flexibility. It gives you that a reduced likelihood that your business is going to slow down, because you've got that continuity there, that element of being able to be more resilient almost. Well, that's what it is, isn't it? It's increasing your resilience.
Sure, definitely. And I think it's how fundamentally you can make things easier. So I'll give you another example. When we were working with the hotel group in the Netherlands, we developed, so they have 19 hotels and growing, every month. And they decided to go with kind of one concept that goes across the restaurants in all the hotels, and we looked at that and was like, okay, how can we de-skill it so that we can centralize development, centralize all that element of costings, finances, production, all of that, and then be able to deliver that to the hotels in a really simple format that means you don't need executive chefs in every hotel. You need head chefs or kitchen managers. And the way we did that was we looked at certain elements and, obviously we standardized some bits, but we started working with Rationale. And in a previous life, I've worked with Unox. And what these guys do now is they have all their ovens sitting on Wi-Fi that connects to a central hub, wherever the central kitchen or development kitchen might be. You develop the recipes now in a central location. You do the development, you do it in the oven that everyone's using, and then you send the recipe to the oven via the web, and it becomes a button. So I'll give you a prime example. We delivered it. We designed this like pastry slab, which was pastry layered up with loads of ingredients. It was beautiful. You could produce it in bulk as a prep item, store it in the freezer. So we did a really clear SOP on that. And then it came out of the freezer and it went into the Rationale, and they pushed a button for breakfast and it cooked. No need on. And this was done by a breakfast chef. The KP could have done it if he needed to, if they were busy at breakfast and what have you, because they take the product out, they put it in, they press the button, and it bakes. As a central operator that is going to be delivered perfect every time because you've done the development on the same oven and you've sent the same recipe through. So that's what I'm saying about de-skilling. Is it can make operations more efficient without compromising cost and all the rest of it. Prime example, Gale's Bakery. It's exactly the way Gale's Bakery work. They do not have bakers in every single store because they've systemized it in a very similar way. That means they pull the items out, they prove it to an SOP, and then they pull it out and they put it in an oven with a button. And it delivers a consistent product across 100 stores. They're just two examples of how de-skilling doesn't need to be always about cutting costs, cutting people, cutting quality. If anything, it's about making those people more productive, increasing consistency and delivering quality every single time, which is what is going to make any hospitality business successful. So I think, it's let's forget some of the ways we used to do it in the past and embrace, the where the market is and where tech is and be able to use it effectively.
And any way that we can improve consistency, first and foremost, is a win for any business, because I think that's where we tend, or certainly my experience with working, or even visiting hospitality businesses, it's so disappointing when you go have something that's amazing, you go back again, and it doesn't quite hit the spot. That's a problem. And if we're able to do something to combat that by de-skilling parts of the process, it's not necessarily reducing that skill level or the requirements across the whole process. It's just parts of it that will allow you to create more consistent results. Then that is a win for you and your business. And again, if it helps you to operate on a smaller number of people, then again, that's a win in the current climate. Again, we can't turn our backs on that either. You're right. It's taken that view that we have of our industry and that romantic look at it, certainly from a chef's point of view. We need to step back from that and be real and say, right, actually, how can we maintain what we need to, but without actually compromising that guest experience? Again, we've come back to that. That's fundamentally what we're there to provide, is a great guest experience. And if we can do that in a way that is easier for our people as well, reduce that workload of our people, then we're on a winner. So we're coming towards the end now. But go on,
Sorry,
go on.
just on that. Sorry, I know we're running out of time, but if we go back to the very first question that you asked about hospitality, we said about creating memorable experiences for the guest. That is what is number one, right? The only thing that gets in the way of that is ego. And that then comes down to the chef wanting to deliver it his way or whatever it might be. But fundamentally, it's about delivering the best experience and the most memorable experience for the guest. And if that means that you do it a different way, but deliver it every time, you can't sit in a conversation with a chef who goes, I have no people, I have to take things off the menu, or I need to close for lunch, if you don't look at ways that you can make the people he's got more productive. And that's the word that I want to be. Is it's not about efficiency, it's not about cost saving. Yes, if you can, perfect, especially like you said. It's about making people more productive, more engaged. And the generation now don't want to be sat there for 2 years learning how to do prep, because they're a lot more creative, because they're used to doing it on social media and they're used to creating now, the content creators. So if you ask them to do a menial task, it's boring. You ask them to create, you ask them to be a part of developing something, they become more engaged. So take the non-emotive bits, the boring bits out of it, because people don't train how to be a commie anymore for 2 years. Let people be creative, let people express themselves, and it's going to deliver a better guest experience at the end, and it's going to make your people more engaged and more passionate, and it's going to go back to the other questions we were talking about, which was retention, attraction, engagement, and all of those things. So it shouldn't be a dirty word. For me now, it should be one of those that people are looking at and going, it's a great opportunity to do something different in the business.
Yeah, it comes down to the fact that we have to adapt and we have to be agile, and we have to throw out what we know about what employees want, and we have to move to what the current employment or the employees that are coming into the workforce now are looking for. And I think ultimately that's the fundamental message of this whole episode: is we've got to adapt and be prepared to adapt. And if you're not, there's consequences that come along with that. So we are coming towards the end now, and it's been a great conversation. And I know last time we spoke, we didn't really explore this next area with people. But I want to know, from the point of view of a book, what is, whether it's a more recent one or one that you've read a long time ago, what's one that's really had an impact for you on your life, your career? Is there one that stands out?
Yeah, there's two actually, and it's interesting because I heard you started to ask this question on the podcast. So when you said, will you come on and do an episode, I've been thinking about it a lot, and there's quite a few, but there's two that stuck out for me for very different reasons. The first one was, it's a book called Building a Brand Story by Donald Miller, and it's a book that I read about 4 times and done lots of highlights in when I was developing Auden Hospitality. And it resonated with me that much that we were about to go live with the website, and I stopped going live and I completely changed it based on this book. And it talks you all the way through kind of building your brand and what to look for, how to talk to customers, how to be clear in your vision. And there's kind of a website that goes with it that you can help you do it as well. So anyone looking to build a brand, anyone wanting to revisit their brand right now, really encourage anyone to go back and do that. The second one is one that I was recommended to read a while ago when I first started managing across different countries, and started, my workload was increasing. It's a book called Who Not How by Dan Sullivan, and it really talks about how, as a leader, when you get a task, you should think about who can deliver that task and not how you deliver that task. And it's how you as a leader can kind of balance your workload and start managing your teams and start giving encouragement to your teams. And I thought it was a great book to talk about, especially after this episode, because it's really helped me. And my sister recently took over the family business, and the first thing I did was send her this book to kind of go like, when you start getting tasks, when you start getting loads of things on your to-do list, how can you make those tasks go to other people and kind of manage the process? So two really, really good books that I would recommend.
Yeah, bro. And certainly that Building a Brand Story, I came across that the other week, and I've added it to my list of ones to get to, so might have to bump that up a little bit. But
bump it up for sure.
Yeah, I think the thing is, and certainly Who Not How, I haven't read that, but it's in the title alone, it sounds like it speaks to the fact of having the right people in the right places, doing the right jobs. When you do that, most times you will get the job done because you have the right people who have got the right mindset and will adapt in the right way. And again, another one I've got to add to the list now, but it isn't always a case of, the standard operating procedures. They're great, they're handy to have, but when things go wrong and things stray away from, standard operating procedures, you need to have the right people there who are able to deal with that. And it all comes down to people again. It's one of the things that has motivated me to do what I'm doing, and I don't think it's ever going to change. We're never going to be able to remove people from the hospitality industry. It's a fundamental part of delivering that guest experience. So
for sure, and I think the book was sorry, on Who Not How. The book is really interesting as well, because it talks of it not necessarily just from a leader who's managing people in, say, a restaurant. It talks about people who are solo business operators and how you can still deliver a team or have a team even if you're delivering something on your own. Do you outsource accounting instead of doing it yourself? That gives you back the freedom of time, and that freedom of time, then you could use it on your business or you could use it with your family. And I think one thing that was the huge takeaway that I took from that book is, outsourcing or finding people to do some of the tasks that you don't enjoy doing actually gives you back a freedom of time that you can spend in much more, ways that can benefit you much more, and whether that's going training, whether that's spending it with your family. So I think, people listening to this, it's not just about whether you have a big team underneath you to read those type of books, because you can apply them in many different ways from that as well. So yeah, it's a good mindset to be in.
Yeah. Brilliant. Listen, how can people find out more about you, connect with you, and find out about Auden and what you do with your business?
Yeah, sure. So I easiest place is LinkedIn. Jump over there and find me on LinkedIn. The website, audenhospitality.com. You can see everything we do across the three different companies there. And, again, there's links to YouTube and different bits and pieces on there as well. There's quite a bit of free resource on Auden Resource Hub for any kind of young leaders as well. So go over there and take a look. And yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place.
Brill. Listen, Scott, thank you very much. It's been great to have you back on the podcast. Great to chat with you at length again about our amazing industry and most importantly, the amazing people in the industry and how we can get the most out of them. So listen, thank you so much again for joining me on the Hospitality Leadership Podcast.
Thanks, Andy. Really appreciate it.